Hello. How is everybody? Awesome. Okay, so we are here to talk about a kind of a soft subject that has a lot of possibilities in terms of, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, good. In terms of discussion, so I want to make sure that whatever you sort of thought you might get out of this discussion, I want you to keep it in mind, keep thinking of your prickliest, most difficult questions that you have, so we can break past the word dream, which is a cliche word often misused. So I'm going to leave a lot of time for questions and discussion. So keep that in mind and start storing up your questions. So to begin with, how many people here consider themselves an overachiever? Okay, that's a little bit. How many people here would say they have overachiever tendencies? Okay. How many control freaks are in the room at this time? Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. How many perfectionists do we have here? Many, many, many. And how many people here have a voice inside their heads that says, you're not doing enough? Okay, that's almost everyone except the people who are eating and thinking about how they're not doing enough because they didn't raise their hands while they were eating. Okay. I already asked you this. You're all overachievers. Congratulations. Or you describe yourselves as underachievers, which is a very overachiever thing to do, by the way. Being an overachiever can stunt your truest desires, dreams, and ambitions because when you expect perfection and control, when you're inside your head a lot and you're telling yourself that you're never doing enough, which I'm going to say maybe 80% of the women I know live that way, it is very, very easy to slowly lose sight of yourself and what you want from your life, particularly as you grow older and your desires and needs change, which they do every second you're alive. Bad news. So you lose sight of your values. And by values, and what I'm saying is, when you exist in a cognitive space of wanting control and you're trying to think your way to solutions about how to control where you're headed, it's extremely hard to lose sight. It's extremely easy to lose sight of your values. And by values, I don't mean, it can mean I value community, I value my kids, I value my husband, I believe in God, or I have faith in nature. What I mean is a much less sort of, a more artistic interpretation of the word values, as in, I didn't really know it, but I value spontaneity more than I thought. And this is the kind of thing that you discover along the way in your life. So even though you're walking around saying, I value organization, control, and I value making plans and sticking with them, that's who I am. It's very easy to lose sight of the fact that you actually also value the opposite of those things, that you actually love spontaneity, and yet you've defined yourself as this person who likes plans, and yet somehow when plans fall through, you're really happy. What's that about? So we're trying to get at a realm of thinking and feeling, a realm of feeling beyond thinking, where you actually get in touch with what your truest, deepest desires and dreams are. One of the reasons that we have to explicitly say we're not going to just talk about the dreams that you're thinking about is there's a problem in the world, and that is the internet makes overachievers neurotic. Why? Why does that happen? It happens because perfectionist overachievers live inside their heads often, and when you put them in front of images of perfection and overachievement, they go crazy. They lose their minds. And even when you know how to keep that world away from you really well, every time you get a glimpse of it, there are just too many different versions of perfection that are thrown into our faces every day. And it's impossible, not only is it impossible to process the mere fact of how big the world is and how many things are going wrong everywhere across the globe, but it's also extreme. I mean, we were not meant as animals to have a window onto every single failing, disaster, corruption, sadness that's happening on the entire globe. It's a catastrophic thing that we are all actually available to see all these things because sensitive people can't handle it. On top of that, though, we also have a kaleidoscope of perfection that we can see around the globe, and sensitive people, overachievers, perfectionists, and control freaks cannot handle having access to that much perfection. So how many people here have gone on Instagram and thought, I should have learned to speak Italian? Or, oh, I should be raising pygmy goats in Oregon, and I missed my true calling. Anybody? I want to see the pygmy goat people right now. Okay, they're out there. So basically, we're trying to undo the neuroticism that is incited in us by the nature of our current culture and the nature of the tools that we have to use just to exist in this world. The point of pursuing your big dreams, and by pursuing your big dreams, I also mean just knowing what you value and love the most at a deep level, and also knowing what you might do if you had total freedom and didn't have to earn $1. These are things that should be thought about and felt about. And the point of understanding and engaging with your big dreams. I don't care about whether you go out and pursue that dream, you still need to know what it is. You need to know what these things are. The point of pursuing your big dreams is to remind yourself what you love the most, and because by doing that, by reminding yourself what you truly value, not only are you guided through your day-to-day life in a way that feels more organic and less cognitively messy and upset and anxious, but you also naturally make decisions that support you as a human being. So, the point isn't to do more or achieve more. We're not talking today about here's how you're going to achieve more. All we're talking about is trying to connect with and engage with who you are at a core level and what drives you, and what, not just what has driven you, but what really connects with you and will drive you moving in the present moment and in the future. So we're trying to make an organic connection with your values. The best way to start down the path towards understanding what you love the most and what you value the most and what your real dreams are is do less. Doing less carves out a space for you to look for, discover, and embrace who you are and what you love. Now, why should you do less? Because right now you're doing way too much. You got to trust me on this. If your head says, I'm not doing enough, you are automatically already doing way, way, way too much. If you tell me, I'm a slacker, and I'm actually an underachiever, and I don't do that much at all, I'm very lazy, you're also doing too much. You're not lazy. You're actually an overachiever who's living in denial of some of your truest states. Your biggest drives are being muted. So unless someone in this room wants to tell me that every day they ride their bicycle to a dive bar and they drink 3 gin and tonics and then they ride a bicycle home and pass out while they're watching The Real Housewives of Atlanta, I'm going to say that most of you are doing too much. Is anyone living that way? Because congrats on making it here. Awesome. So then you might want to know, well, what should I do instead of too much? What should I fill this do less space with? Do literally anything else besides what you believe you should be doing. So when you make some space to do something in particular that feels pointless, worthless, absurd, embarrassing, trivial, selfish, all the things that women are told, these are words that describe almost everything we do through some people's eyes. But if you look at something and you say, that's too trivial, that's worthless, that doesn't matter, why would I waste my time on that? This is the fertile ground where you're going to figure out what you really need and how you feel. Or you're not going to figure out anything. You're just going to spend some time doing something worthless for a change. And in fact, now you're doing the opposite of what you usually do, and that is automatically an enlightening scenario. You are automatically going to learn things in your body simply by doing something that you've never done before. I mean, I don't think I've ever done a slideshow before, and I'm definitely learning a lot of things inside my body right now. But that's a good example. You challenge yourself to do. People like you think, like us, think in terms of what can I do to achieve more, and what we need to open up this space. And I don't mean take a really hard yoga class either. Find something pointless and do it. So now we're going to try to talk about what your dreams might be. We're going to try to identify what your dreams could be. So I want you to, I was going to say write this on your phone. If you feel like doing that, you can. If you just want to hold it in your head. But I really want you to try to force yourself to get to one word for each answer in order to answer this. Oh, that's nice. Oh, I'm skipping. Well, I did say that incredibly, but I'm skipping that. Oh, that's kind of interesting, actually. Yeah, insecure explaining. I won't insecurely explain that one. Yeah. You deserved to feel good, but you don't anymore. I wanted to fix that. Okay, so here we are. Now see how great imperfection is. Everyone's relaxed. We're all very relaxed. Okay, so we're going to talk about what your dream is, and I want to do an exercise where you answer 3 questions. First of all, what part of your personality embarrasses you, or what part of your personality were you told you should mute a little bit in order to be a more effective, productive human being? So it's good to write down something or think of something that when you think I'm not doing enough, your mind immediately goes to because I'm lazy, or because I'm so wrapped up in what other people think of me and I need to stop doing that. Or I'm very vain. I'm just a vain person. My mom told me it and she was right. And then the second thing I want you to think about is, what traits do you consider embarrassing or silly in other people? So what do you see? And I don't mean like evil, because we all see evil around us sometimes, but things like, oh, that girl really needs to stop it with that. I don't like that. And just like, I don't do it that way. That's not how I do it. And then the final thing is, what's the thing you loved as a kid that you don't do anymore because it seems too pointless or foolish or trivial or silly, or it just doesn't fit into your life, but you loved it? And this can be made mud pies. I mean, it can be elemental, or it can be, I was a ballerina once. Okay, so does everyone have some thoughts about that? I'm not going to force you each to stand up and tell me what you've written down. But what I want you to do is I want you to think about the nexus of those three things, okay? I want you to think about what these things have in common for you, if they have anything in common. Because at the center of these things, I think you're going to find something that you will not allow yourself to do, something that you absolutely don't have time for, and that if you did do it, it would be incredibly embarrassing. Now I'm going to give you a kind of silly example, but I had this beautiful friend who was kind of like a guru, a little bit of a type of guru. And right around the time when I started writing my advice column, Ask Polly, she was building a business, and she had a website that featured a lot of really beautiful pictures of herself in various outfits. And I used to go to this website and snicker and say, that's not the way I do it. That's not cool. That is not me, not me. And at the time I was kind of, I was still wearing clothes that I wore at Duke. I had kids, and I was just, my hair was out of control. I don't know how many people here have kids. Who has kids? There's a period after, I'm going to say like 5 years after your final pregnancy, where your hair just starts to disintegrate. That's where I was. I just had hair, and you haven't adjusted product-wise to the times. I had this, basically I was like, I didn't know what makeup was. I thought makeup was the makeup of the 80s. And so I was basically in this space where I thought about this woman a lot, and I had a bad attitude about her. And I finally figured out one day that I value looking good. I value it. And I was walking around saying, I'm a slob, I don't care, I don't do my makeup, that's whatever. And so what I did was I called a friend. She explained the miracle products that exist in the world today. The makeup has changed dramatically in 30 years, incredibly enough. I know I'm blowing your minds. And hair products essentially didn't exist in the 80s except for maybe like stiff hairspray. So I figured out my routine, which was important because at the time I was starting to do book events, and when I got ready for my book events, I would look in the mirror and put on my Maybelline old makeup and say, I mean, like 20-year-old makeup, and say, "You're terrible at this. You look terrible. This is terrible." And that was the way I prepared to do public speaking events. It was really effective. So I started to lean into the fact that I care about beauty, and I started to lean into the fact that I don't care about fashion, but I needed a uniform, and I found myself a uniform that worked for me, that I felt comfortable in. And then every public event I did after that was just so much better because I didn't have a ritual of berating myself on the way to the event. I had a ritual where I just said, you put on the primer, who knew this existed, and then you put on the makeup and you go, and it's good. So my point is that the things that aggravate you and chafe you in your life often point to an area where you are saying that you value one thing, but you actually value the opposite of that thing. And you're seeing someone indulge something that would make your life better. And what I needed to indulge, honestly, was vanity, because it was a piece of having to publicly present, was feeling okay about how I looked. As long as you're someone who cares about beauty, if you get on stage without feeling good about how you look, you're gonna have a hard time. Right? So you are here not to support someone else's idea of how a woman should be. You're here to support your core notions and feelings of what a woman should be that already exist inside your body, and you just need to figure out what they are. It doesn't matter if this secret value is that some of the things that you have to battle is the moralism around every single choice a woman makes. You have to think about how your idea of what you love has been run through this, interpreted by our very broken culture and made into something that's cheap or stupid or embarrassing because you value specific things that are going to sound like sins because we make everything a woman does into a sin in our culture. That's just a fact. Come see me later if you don't agree, and we'll discuss it. Okay, so now you're starting to think about the things that you won't let yourself do, which are very close, or the things that you are pretty sure you don't like, which are very close to the things that you once loved often, and are very close to ways of unlocking a new path for you. Pay attention to any time you're dismissive or embarrassed or ashamed, because it's useful information. Now, I want to make one very important point, which is that, two more important points. Number one is, now I forgot it, because sometimes when you say, the first point is, and you're like, wait, I'm going to forget it because I gave it a number. Overachievers often avoid the things that they love and care about the most, naturally. Now, why is that true? It's true because overachievers are afraid of failing. That's an obvious one. And so a thing that you care about a lot is going to feel, the stakes of failing seem very, very high. it's also true that when you mention something you love to someone else, if it's not their dream, they'll say, why wouldn't you just do that? You could totally do that. I know you, you're good at that. And you'll say, oh, no, it's so hard to do the thing I love the most. It is so hard. And they'll say, people do that all the time. I was like this about music. Now that I live in Durham and I'm around a lot of musicians, there are tons of musicians here, I'm sort of like, oh, people just do music. They play music. It's amazing. You can just go out and play music if you want to. But I always treated it like, no, you've got to be like a rock star to play music. You've got to be really talented and really good at it. And it would be so embarrassing to just write a little song that's awful, because sometimes what you want is the huge, exuberant, visionary version of your dream, and you create this untouchable version of something that you actually would love to do in your life day to day. So right now I'm taking voice lessons over Zoom, which is one of the most humiliating and pathetic things I've probably ever done in my life. But it is amazing to just engage with music and to understand what my body wants me to do, which is sing. I love singing. So overachievers avoid the things they love the most often. The other reason is the stakes are too high in the area that you love the most. When you care a lot about something, a really good example of this is with kids. Because when you have kids, you care so much about them naturally, and the stakes are just so high because you love them so much, it can actually be easy to avoid knowing how much you love your kids. It can be very easy to tell yourself a story about how you should be interacting with your kids that keeps you safe from feeling how much you care about them and how much you worry about them. So, and yet, if you want to support your children and love them, you have to show up for the depth of your feeling for them, which is extremely hard to do because it's a huge emotion, right? So that's one example of how that happens as a mother. The other thing is the anxiety of failing at something that you care way too much about is an extreme deterrent that will act on you in ways that you are not consciously aware of. So if you have something that you're absolutely romantic about inside your head, it's you're just so invested in it and you love it so much that you can barely even see other people do it because it makes you so envious to see it. It can be extremely difficult to just do a little piece of that thing, and yet all signs are pointing to the fact that you love that thing, and doing it will actually support you in ways that you're unaware of. When you pursue something that is in line with your values at a deep level, every other thing you do gets easier. It's easier to be generous. It's easier to be patient. It's easier to show up for the stuff you don't really want to do that much because you are being fed something that you deeply, deeply desire. So I covered the fact that overachievers definitely, absolutely avoid, and I guarantee you that everybody in this room has something that they're avoiding that would feed them. So open your mind to that. The only other very, very important points I want to make, and this will sound like kind of, woo-woo, but pursuing your big dreams can be very, very scary. Even engaging with your big dreams can be very, very, very scary. But pursuing your biggest dreams is the most realistic, pragmatic way you can possibly live. We live in a society where the word wannabe is thrown around for anyone doing something as if you do something, you're naturally trying to get somewhere with it and become great and popular and famous, that's an affliction, that a bad story that our culture tells. When you let go of the idea of a wannabe, which is an important step towards being someone who can pursue their dreams, you actually understand that anyone who engages with an activity is essentially as successful as they're ever going to be. We only have this moment, and we only have this day to engage with the things we love. And when you write, you're a writer, so call yourself one. If you're working on a novel, you're a novelist. If you paint, you're a painter. And no one who is truly successful at any of these things and feels good about it would ever tell you otherwise. It's only people who don't feel satisfied with where they are that try to make distinctions between real writers and fake writers. That distinction does not exist. So, when you pursue your biggest dreams, even though you live in a culture that tells you that you're living in a fantasy world, you are actually living in the most realistic way of all, because you're connecting to the core of who you are as a person, and doing that supports everything in your life. When you feed your core self, you become stronger, more flexible, more patient. And when your core self has space to play, everything else you do becomes more joyful, and then suddenly you find that you have other dreams too that you might want to dabble in or engage with, and you basically discover an entire world of dreams inside you that you never would have discovered those if you never did less in the first place. The other thing I want you to understand is when you turn your back on your dreams, you're living in a fantasy world. Because when you refuse to engage with, examine, and celebrate your deepest core values and desires, you're essentially living in a virtual reality simulation where you've replaced everything that you loved as a child and everything that you love as a human animal with our culture's values, which is truly harrowing because our culture has pretty broken values at this moment, thanks to the fact that we're all neurotic, thanks to the internet. So the main thing that I want to impart with you is that as you start moving towards the things that you love the most, you're going to feel a ton of shame, you're going to feel selfish, you're going to feel like you don't have time, you're going to listen to all the reasons why you should not be wasting your time on these things, and you're also going to be afraid of being misunderstood. And you're going to think in terms of the outcomes. Where will this lead? What is this really worth? And I want you to try very hard not to think about outcomes at all. I'd like you to focus on process. That's the way you find your dreams, and that's the way you feed the dreams you already have. So in terms of shame, I'm actually kind of a living, breathing cautionary tale of the perils of pursuing your dreams, because I wrote a marriage memoir that came out last year called Foreverland, and it's my dream was to write a book about my marriage, a memoir, a first-person story about my marriage, and I wanted it to be funny and also very, very realistic, because I didn't feel like there were that many non-sugar-coated stories about marriage out there, but I wanted it to be really funny. So I was writing it, and I wrote a lot of chapters about how much I love my husband, and part of it, I kind of started out thinking, I'll just explain to people how to have a great marriage by telling the stories of the times that I stood up for myself and told the truth and all that. But I'm writing, chapter after chapter of how much I love my husband, and I'm like, this is ugh, this is not what I wanted to write. I wanted to write like an interesting, real, honest thing. So I decided I'm going to write a chapter about anger. And as I sit down to write my chapter about anger, my husband had a cold that day, thank God. And husband cold, I don't know, does anyone have any experience with this? So he's walking around the house. That's how he sneezes. It's like he's yelling at something. Like if you're in the room with him when he sneezes, it can make you jump 10 feet. So I was typing, I was just trying to describe how terrible he sounded, and I was laughing to myself, and I wrote this whole thing, and then I had written all these awful descriptions of him, and then I wrote, do I hate my husband? Yeah, sure, of course, definitely, because it was just like, of course you have to say, yes, it's funny, this is a funny chapter. So I showed it to my husband, he laughed, he thought it was great. He's like the ideal husband of a writer, because he's like, that's funny. I'm actually worse than that, he often says. So the New York Times, Miracle of Miracles, wanted to excerpt a chapter of my book, and so they chose the chapter about anger. And when they said, what will the subtitle be, I said, why don't we make it, do I hate my husband? Yeah, sure, definitely. And they were like, okay, fine. That excerpt, 1.8 million people have read it. Very popular, and very unpopular, too. And so my book came out a month later, and a lot of the coverage, some of the coverage was definitely a reaction to people's reaction to that chapter being, this is a woman who hates her husband, she sucks, we hate her, she's anti-man. That happened, and then my face was in the pages of the New York Post. Two things. I was on The View, and they showed a picture of me and my husband and talked about, but they didn't name me. They just said, this journalist and wife and mother says she hates her husband, calls him a snoring heap of meat. This is a whoopee. And then they basically agreed that women shouldn't write books about their marriage. And then the New York Post had a headline that said, wife hates husband, calls marriage insane. So basically, I had this month-long period. I've been writing online for years, but I had this period of time where I really felt like I'd made a mistake, not just in writing my book, but in excerpting that chapter. Pretty much my whole career looked like a huge mistake in that moment. But that moment was such a gift because people kept asking me about the experience of, whoa, and everybody misunderstands you, which a former self of mine would have just felt misunderstood in that moment. But instead, because I had made something that based on what I value, which is telling the truth about relationships, and I value love and connection, and I value self-deprecating humor. It was a gift because I had the opportunity to express what I love the most and what I value the most, and I took that opportunity. You don't need to rehearse that much in any situation if the thing that you're doing is something that you love and value. You can show up and wing it when you know exactly why you're there. And conversely, if you don't know why you're doing something, it is very hard to succeed at it. It's very hard to be good at something that you're like, why am I doing this? What does this do for me? Why am I here? Likewise, if you're engaged with the process of doing something and you can feel how good the process, where you have a relationship to the work and you love that process, you can withstand a lot of the noise. I mean, for me, I love writing. I like showing off, obviously, but it's not like my dream is to be, hey, TED Talking. That's not my dream. My dream is to communicate and connect with people and to connect with myself through creating words on a page. So I hope that I've gotten through all the different things that are actually, I hope that I've expressed how fundamental it is to connect with something, even if it's ridiculous, even if it's just, I spend 3 hours on a Sunday playing Assassin's Creed with my son. Anything that you show up for, and even when you don't know what it is to you, you release yourself into this space where you say, let's just see what's here. There's so much learning and so much feeling that comes from putting yourself into a place where you might figure out what beautiful passions are living inside your body that you do not acknowledge and feel in your mundane, overachiever, perfectionist life. So, finally, okay, I have a few more points, but I kind of want to just go to questions and talk about dreams and things like that. So, never call any activity you do a hobby. That's a way of demeaning an activity. It's not just a side dish to your life. The things that you do that you connect to are bigger than that, and you need to show respect for the things that you love. Don't get hung up on, people often write to me as an advice columnist and they say, I don't know what my passion is. I don't feel passionate about anything, which is why I say start with doing less, start with doing something random. I played this game, Stardew Valley. It's a farming game for about a year after my third book came out, and it was the best thing I ever did. Now I live on a farm. Okay, so you never know where things are going to lead. And you feel passion it's a feeling. Passion is not a thought. You don't decide what you're passionate about. You have to feel your way there. So you have to put yourself in situations where you can feel what you love. A completely worthless, we covered this. Doing anything you love for reasons you don't understand is therapy. You don't need to understand why you love something. Right now, I really love sitting in the gravel on my, it's kind of a property. I bought 3 acres here. I moved from LA to Durham. I grew up here. And I bought 3 acres with my LA property dollars, and now I have a big problem on my hands. This is another cautionary tale, actually. But I love to sit in the gravel, in my gravel driveway, and pry up grass with this kind of knife-like thing I have. It's awesome to do that. And I like to, if I can make myself do it, that's the wrong language. If I can just say, I'm just going to be out here all day, I'm just going to I'll say to my husband, I'm going to go out at sunrise and I'm not going to come in until sunset, and I'm just going to see what needs to be done. That way I take it out of the to-do list realm, and then it's just into a being realm, like, dude, I'm just in my yard. Then I really feel good. I listen to music and I just pry up grass. I make no progress. It all just grows right back. It's a nightmare. But I love it. So in other words, anything you do that you're actually showing up for and connecting with is good for you. And then finally, my major final point, skip, is you're already whole. So you're not pursuing a big dream in order to become whole. The value of a big dream that is built, that springs out of your core values and your core self, is that it reminds you that you're already whole. The feeling of engaging with things that you love at that deep level, it's a feeling of wholeness where you say, I'm not missing anything. It's the exact opposite of the feeling you get when you look on Instagram and say, I'm missing Italian and pygmy goats and some great abs. That feeling that I get when I'm prying grass out of the gravel is, strangely enough, a feeling of wholeness that I would never have predicted. You could not tell me a year ago that I would have felt that way. So that's where we're headed. It's not about outcomes. It's not about becoming a better person or a different person. It's not about being more loved or more special, because everybody has different values. Plenty of people, you can tell them your values and they'll say, not only don't I like your values, I think you're bad for valuing those things. And that's the way the world is. You have to stand up for what feels good to you if you want to feel joy in the moment today, which is the point of being alive, to feel joy today. So, to feel joyous and whole, I want you to go out there, find your worthless, pointless, terrible, wretched dreams, and embrace them, and crawl on your knees in the dark until you get closer and closer to things that make you feel truly whole. Thank you. That wasn't so terrible. All right, overachiever. Does anyone have a question for me? We have mics. And it can be anything under the sun. I know I just gave a very general talk, but I do give advice. So pretty good at giving advice sometimes, not all the time. Right here in the blue jacket.
Everybody else in the blue jacket? Had to go do blue. Thank you. You mentioned earlier about our minds are always changing. And our ideas are always changing. So if we want to pursue our dreams, how do we know today that we pursue is what we're going to? That's part of your process, I guess, but how do you reconcile that?
I think that's a great question. And in fact, it's sort of like what I've noticed as I've been more generous with myself and giving myself whatever, permission to engage with all kinds of waste of time things. What I've noticed is I'll start to do something a little bit and then I'll get avoidant about it. So when I started doing voice lessons, I really learned at first how bad my voice has become. I had a nice voice when I was younger, but you get older and your voice changes. And I was doing these, it's like, that's a vocal exercise. Who knew? But I was very bad at it. I'd just sit there going over and over again. It was very painful. And this was my whole lesson, was doing things like that. So I felt stupid and I wanted to quit many, many times. And then I got to a point where my voice actually started to sound better, and I didn't even understand why. My vocal instructor's great. But then when I got better, I wanted to quit because I thought, okay, this is good enough. I didn't want to keep investing in it, even though it was something I loved, because it felt unfamiliar to give myself something that cost money, that mattered to me, and to commit to it. The commitment seemed strange. So I do think that there's a lot of how do you decide, right? And won't you just change your mind? These are important questions. For me, My philosophy is you just stay in the present, right? And you see how you feel from day to day, and you don't make sudden decisions about, oops, this was a mistake, I should never have done this. You don't change course. You basically, if you've got an idea, maybe I do want a pygmy goat, you know? You sort of live with it for a while, visit a pygmy goat farm. You know, you take little tastes of things, and then you see how it sits with you, and every step of the way. I mean, I think this is true for everything in life. You're sort of just, a thing that I say to myself often is like, you don't have to decide right now. But I'm also very aware of, like, if I'm doing one of the things that I've always done, I question that. So if I say, this was kind of nice, but this is dumb, voice lessons, how long can I really do this? If I hear that kind of sound, then I kind of, gently push myself back in, like, you don't really know how good your voice can get. Let's just stick with it. So, I mean, I think my best advice is try a lot of different things on, and also you will feel like you're changing your mind constantly, right? I mean, I think that critical thinkers who are very high-strung, and I mean, whatever, it's almost everyone I know, about the things they love, it's just easy to change your mind constantly. And so a lot of the challenge of just life is to be patient with not knowing, right? Just stay in the uncertainty of, is this the thing that will change everything in my life? Is this something that I'll even enjoy? Or is this something foolish? We don't know. We're just showing up for it. Am I gonna wanna sit prying grass out of the gravel for the rest of my life? I mean, when I think that way, I think, why ask that question? There doesn't have to be a reason for everything. That's something that I often tell myself. So like, tomorrow, I might never pry grass out of gravel again, but I'm gonna show up for it. I liked it before, oh, I still like it. That's how it is. That's how being alive is, when you're in touch with how you feel. So, yeah, was that? Okay. Anybody over there?
How do you feel about jealousy?
Jealousy? I love it. I think it's really incredibly instructive. When you start paying attention, I mean, I think that the thing with my friend where I noticed my envy was pointing to something that I wanted to fix in my life, from that point on, anytime I had a lot of noise around something, I'd say, oh, look what you're doing. I didn't realize how competitive I was with other writers. And I mean, most writers are competitive with other writers. There's a way that it kept me from reading as much as I should have been, because I couldn't handle the feeling of, dead writers, safe. They're allowed to be great. I will give them permission. But a writer my age, a little like me, yeah, it's almost like exposing yourself to things that make you feel envious and jealous, or that can be great for you, right? Because it brings up so much. But I mean, you have to take care of yourself too. I mean, I don't spend a ton of time on Instagram because it just affects me, when I'm in the wrong place. Because I love beauty, and people are really good at making things beautiful, and it kind of hurts to see I want to own that beautiful thing. Part of the challenge of dreams is definitely figuring out how not to own. Like letting go of ownership, letting go of like, this is part of my identity, it's my identity. I'm a pygmy goat farmer too, allowing yourself to you don't have to own something to love it and enjoy it and find passion in it. You can actually just, I love hot men. Who doesn't? Hot men. Sometimes I'm like, it's just so nice how much I love hot men. You can enjoy it without making out with a hot man, incredibly enough. I've found you can actually stop yourself. So yeah, jealousy. I mean, basically all of the sins, right? All sins are things to look at. Gluttony. I am very gluttonous. And these things point to something, often something that you love. So any sin, we don't like to look at sins because we're afraid of being defined in a negative way. We don't want to admit that we're animals underneath our skin. So anything that you can dig for that's a little bit hard to own might open up a whole pathway into like a cathedral for you. Who else has a question? Sorry, I want to move around. Oh, but you're right next to a mic. Okay, I'll do you first. Okay, you first, because I already pointed at you. It's so hard to decide. See, I'm the embodiment of wishy-washy, can't decide.
I just think one of the things I'm sort of hearing you say is that we as women limit ourselves. And the workshop we did this morning talked a lot about the shoulds. And so I get into a spiral if I'm doing something without an outcome, or that doesn't have an outcome. I get into a spiral of I should be doing X, I should be doing the dishes, I should be doing the laundry, I should work on this project, I should clean out the freaking drawer, or whatever it is, right? Yeah. So what would you say to those of us who have a lot of that self-talk?
Yeah, I have that too, big time. I think that if you, the starting block, I mean, I'm starting to be able to not go to that place. I kind of identify that kind of, I should be doing 5 other things. That place is like, it's just a bad place. Even on a day when you say, I have to do 15 things today. And you're like, it is undeniable that today I got to do 15 things. Like I have this list. These I got to get through it. Even on that kind of a day, you can't be inside that, oh man, like if you're setting yourself up for failure essentially by the only way that you can get all the things done is by bending the laws of space and time, which you have to start to pay attention to, right? The logic, okay, so if you spend time on something and you're like, I'm gonna do this and then this and then this, but you know that this, in actuality, the first thing takes 3 hours, the second, everything takes so much longer than you think, right? So I think one of the first things you can do is pay attention to how long things actually take. Another thing you can do is set aside 2 hours where you're not allowed to think that you should be doing something else, right? So just take a small chunk of time where you say, this is my should-free zone. And while I'm in this zone, I'm not going to insist in my mind that I should be 2 different places at once and also stopping time the way I do in my everyday life. I'm going to actually just say, I don't care what I get done in these 2 hours. I don't care what the outcome is. I'm just gonna sit in the gravel. I mean, my solution for my garden was sunrise to sunset, maybe 2 days a month. I go out there. Kids, sorry, I'm outside all day, and I don't know if I'll get anything done. But there's something about committing that much. I mean, see, the other thing is, you can say, take a chunk of time and just do this one thing, but there are ways that some of us who are overachievers respond more to an exuberant, overdone, an extreme vision of how to do a version of that. And so for me, saying, I have all day. Sunday is my gardening day. I might not even accomplish anything, but I'm gonna be outside. I don't even say gardening day, I say I'm outside all day that day. And there's something about that frees up this space for me to actually enjoy being out there, where I'm not like, tick-tock, get all the grass out of the gravel, dummy. So it's sort of a matter of paying attention to what works for you and what ways of talking to yourself calm you down. And just the mindfulness behind observing. One thing that I used to say to my husband a lot is, are you rushing? Everything he does, he's rushing. He started to like cooking because he doesn't rush when he's cooking anymore. So anytime you can do something and say, I'm doing this patiently and presently. I usually rush through this, but I'm going to really see if and you might say, I don't enjoy cooking. I'm patient, but I hate it. But you might say, this is actually, I love this activity, and I never pay attention to that because I'm always just trying to get it done. Anything you can do to be present and connect with the ragged, flawed, inadequate world around you and let the reality of those flaws in. Anything you can do at that level, anytime you can remind yourself to exist at that level, you're going to bring a little joy into your life. Because living in reality, which is living in a world where you have dreams, is joy. Reality actually brings you joy when you're not fighting it. Okay, I think we might have time for one more question. Is that right? I haven't even. Okay. One more. Who has an important, let me set you up. Yeah, this better be important. That's okay.
Okay, so
We're underachieving today.
I'm trying to do that. And so as I'm sitting here, I'm picturing myself like being you, sitting in the gravel, picking the grass, and I'd be like, I'm going to clear this section. But like, there's goal setting, right? Like, how do you let go of the, like, is it still pursuing your dream if you're like, oh, I love to take photographs. I'm going to look at all those, and I'm not like, I'm going to make an album by this time. You know what I mean? Like, it's so hard not to set goals for yourself. And I imagine that inhibits the whole process of, so how do you keep yourself in that place without feeling like, I mean, you've been talking so articulately about living in the present and just being here, but you still have that little voice that's like, but I want to get this corner of the driveway done. I mean, do you have that voice, or?
Yeah, I do. And I think that showing up for things and being present to them without goals is also a way of understanding what your goals might be. I mean, you have the benefit of doing something that's as worthless as just prying up grass is that a lot of things come to mind. I mean, you kind of get all this, it's almost like meditating, all this wisdom kind of comes in. And so, and sure, like there are times when, sometimes I'll sit for a while and then I'll say, okay, I've been sitting here for a long time. I'm going to go prune a few bushes, and then I'm going to come back. And sometimes I'll say, I just want to get this section done. And then I'll be like, hold on, man. Don't go there, or you'll start to feel rushed. It's all about mindfulness in the moment. It's sort of like, of course your mind is going to do the same things it always does, of course. But there's like a push and pull. Like right now, for example, I'm not writing my next book, and somehow I have so many ideas for my next book because I said, you don't have to write a book every 2 years. That's crazy. Why don't you just live your damn life and see for sure what you really, really want to write about, because it might surprise you. So now it's sort of like I'll start to write part of a book, and then I'll say, no, I'm not sure I'm ready. I'll write half a chapter, and then I'll say, I feel oppressed now because I'm starting to say, ooh, write your book. You're going to write your book. Look, you're writing your book. It's everything in life is kind of like that. And I'm sounding very hippie. I wore my hippie dress. But there's a way that the more you become attuned to what is working for you and what feels good in the moment, I mean, it really is as simple as pay attention to what feels good. If it feels good to say, I'm going to get this 3x3 square foot area done, or I'm going to write the introduction of my book, and then I'm going to put it down, and I'm just going to, maybe I won't write that book, I don't know. Whatever feels good is going to guide you to what the process that makes the most sense to you. So whatever feels good, deeply good, and feels like it's in line with your values, that you do in your life, whatever makes you feel more present and accepting of reality, that thing will feed every single different thing that you do in your day and in your year and in your relationships. Learning to be present is not overachieving at meditation, right? Learning to be present is about allowing yourself to feel your body in space, feel your emotions, and letting yourself be a flawed, confused, angry, anxious, excited, passionate animal out in the world without shame. Or with shame and noticing your shame. In other words, I mean, mindfulness is probably the word, although I avoid all common words because that's beneath me. I'm a writer. Anyway, does that make sense at all? Okay. Awesome. Well, that's it. Thank you so much. Awesome audience. It was really fun.